Hello, and welcome to this week's WVD Community Podcast. My name's Neil McLaughlin. With us, we have Mark Plettenberg from LoginVSI, Patrick Kula. So Patrick's the new member to our WVD community. So this is his very first podcast with us. So Patrick, official welcome. Obviously, we've mentioned on the newsletter in the previous weeks, but this is your first podcast with us. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil.
And obviously, Stefan needs no introductions. So, hi, Stefan. How are you?
Hey, guys. How are you?
So, Mark, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon, guys.
Do you want to introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, so I'm Mark. I'm from the Netherlands. I work at LoginVSI. You might have seen me around before the whole world went into a lockdown at some user groups or things like that. I work as a product manager at LoginVSI, and all my life is about my professional life is all about performance.
Good. So, how long have you been at LoginVSI now? Then?
Actually, my whole career. So, funny enough, LoginVSI started as an internship position where we made a first rough version of what's now become known as the products that we have, and I've never had a good reason to go.
Oh, wow. So you've worked at LoginVSI your whole career and you've had no other job?
No, just fresh out of school. Well, I did have side jobs next to my study, right? I've been a butcher, which is odd. I've worked in IT healthcare, IT consultancy, but along the sides, it's always been LoginVSI, yeah.
Wow, that's quite rare these days, isn't it? To get someone who sort of people tend to sort of move about a lot with jobs and stuff, and so I think you're the first person I've ever met and spoken to who's worked in the one company like his whole career.
Yeah, but I am sort of cheating, right? I work with all of these other companies around the world, so it's
true. Yeah.
So, Mark, for our listeners who don't know the product of LoginVSI, shall we talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, sure. So LoginVSI is software that can automatically test and validate the impact of change, right? But most people know us for load testing. That's what we've been doing since 2008. We've been breaking stuff. And typically when I'm invited to speak somewhere, it's about breaking stuff because that's cool. That's fun to talk about. And people kind of love disasters. Along the edges of that, of course, we've not been sitting still. We've also worked on making sure that you can test if all of your applications are actually compatible with a change, or you can test that continuously. So rather than pushing 1,000 users at it, what if you can keep a couple of these users running all the time? Now, this used to be only for server-based computing back in the day. And when VDI became a thing, of course, we were in a sweet spot because the first versions of VDI were really horrible. But now we're seeing more and more that it's also physical environments or cloud-based workspaces. And we're just all about safeguarding the performance there every time you make a change. Because we know that every time you touch something, there is a fair chance that you're going to break something.
Break it, yeah.
Yep.
True. And Mark, can you please describe a little bit why talking about LoginVSI, and do you see any big changes compared from on-premises VDI workloads to cloud VDI workloads? What did you see with most of your clients? How can LoginVSI actually help you over there? Or what are the big problems you probably encountered while moving to the cloud?
Yeah, so moving to the cloud is, of course, it's sort of a minefield because there's a lot of political decisions. Where does my data go? Where do my applications live? Where does my data live? So in an ideal situation, you pick up everything today and just move it to the cloud and to one cloud. That would be the easiest scenario to work with. In reality, however, we see that customers are taking small steps to go there, which is the sensible thing to do, right? I'm not arguing that. But it makes it difficult because where's your data? Do you have a hybrid? Do you have hot copies of both files on both locations? What about your databases? So I was watching a video from Mark Plettenberg the other day on YouTube, where he explains Azure data centers. And they're already saying like, hey, our data center needs to be, their tier 1 needs to be within 100 kilometers of each other, or 60 miles if you're measuring in freedom units. Because otherwise you get too much latency. And they're talking about 2 milliseconds latency. And this is really where we see a lot of problems because distance is not something you can beat. There is nothing faster than light. If only we could do things at the speed of light in cables, that would be great. So distance is really a big hurdle, and it's not very transparent where things are changing. So if you look at the VDI technology stack that we've defined, there's about 15 layers all the way from the user to the applications to the hypervisor storage. Only the bottom 4 change when you go to the cloud. So it's not that bad, but on the other hand, it's really bad because they're very impactful. So what if Azure or Amazon changes something on their hypervisor? Say they're patching for Meltdown Inspector, L1TF, those kinds of things. How do you know, right? What if you are adding other software as a service applications to the platform that live on other clouds, right? Who's responsible for that? And so what I see most is there's a lot of finger pointing, and then there's a platform that's currently immature. If we look at server-based computing, I think it's been around for 30 years, right? Still difficult to build. If we look at VDI, it's been around since 2012. The basic issues have been solved, right? We got fast enough storage now. We even have GPUs in case you need them, and we can do it. But still, the majority of VDI environments I see, and remember, I'm negatively biased because we always get called in when there's shit. But there are a lot of VDI environments that are not great. And nothing is going to change if you just pick that up and move it to the cloud. The cloud is not a magical thing that makes it better. If anything, you need to do the same things there.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is probably the number one thing which people talk about when they migrate workloads, as in WVD and any Azure-based things to Azure, is performance. Because they expect to do a simple lift and shift and to get the same performance as they would have done in a on-prem environment without doing any tuning. So a lot of times they'll pick the wrong CPU size, or they'll still have their applications which is sitting on the on-prem environment, or they've got something which is trying to talk to the on-prem environment, or they've picked the wrong storage size, or whatever have you. So I think your product is going to be immensely useful, especially in cloud environments, because it means you can sort of iron out all those problems before you give the desktops to the users, right? Because
and just looking at monitoring doesn't cut it in the cloud, because where's your CPU? Where's your the traditional way of looking at performance is there's less of a point to it. So we're really lucky that we are in this position where we are now, especially with WVD. It's great working there, but it's trying to find that balance between spending enough, right? You need to spend enough on the machine instances that you have, picking the right ones. And I can't predict to you which one that is, because it really depends on your applications. We also don't want to overspend, because you can just buy the biggest badass machines that are out there and throw money at it, which could be a solution if you have unlimited funds. But we really see that there's a sort of the curve flattens, where you don't get the same amount of performance back that you're spending money. And that happens rather soon, let alone you want to, of course, I mean, in theory, you could make the biggest Windows 10 multi-user VM with 250 users on there. But what if you want to do maintenance, right? Can you still reboot it? So that, maybe you should pick a few smaller ones instead, just to be able to do those kinds of tricks.
So what kind of, because obviously you must see a lot of custom environments. I mean, do you get involved in that side of things at all, or?
So yes and no. I always try to explain to people that I'm not necessarily aware of how WVD works, because we're not about to fix your WVD environment. That's been a pitfall for me, especially with Citrix back in the day. Like, oh, I know how Citrix works. A customer would call us, hey, your software is telling me you can only do 5 users on your environment. And I was like, oh, well, that's true. And then they would blame our software, and then I would fix their Citrix environment to prove that we were right. And now we have so many customers that at this scale that doesn't work anymore, of course. So I try to stay out of their WVD environments itself, but we do give guidance like, hey, what's a good instance maybe to start with, or those kinds of things. Okay. But it really depends. There's no one answer that works. I mean, you have the cheap ones that could do, but you can, for some people, even a GPU could be interesting.
So what's the most common issues that you see then out in the wild?
People just clicking around and like, hey, I built this WVD environment and we're going live with it, and there's no proper thinking about the architecture. Like, hey, now I need to do change management. Oh shit, if only I thought about how I could do changes in practice before, because now you're working in a live, well, typically it's proof of concept environment still, but it's the ease that becomes a problem now, where people just turn it on and then get a few users on there, and now what?
Yeah,
exactly.
Just creating a image from the gallery, installing the applications, going to the proof of concept without any optimization, without any testing.
That's it. Or even checking the compatibility of the applications, because what I see most is that the people just try to install something. Maybe it's software that is 20 years old. They just try to get it operable on WVD, but it's simply not always working like that. And yeah, Mark, how can your products help customers with that actually?
Well, the first things that you want to try is, getting some gauge of performance. So you could do this by load testing, but what we're seeing is that a continuous test actually works really well for this. So you have your desktop as is. Maybe there's only Office on it. That's typically a good starting point. And you can throw one of our users on there, the robot user, and it will continue to work on the system as if it's a real person. And from that moment, you have a baseline. You have a stake in the ground. From that moment, at least you can say, hey, things are now staying the same, getting better, or worse. Right? It's only one test user. So I'm not talking about a lot of infrastructure. It's something you can set up quickly, but at least you have some feel for what is happening there. You get insights in latency, maybe even from different locations. You get insights in logon times, into application start times, and maybe even within your application, you could measure a critical process. That's typically what we do further in with customers, like, hey, I'm using SAP. I want to know if I look for a customer, how long does it take? Or, hey, I'm a hospital. I need to look up a patient within 30 seconds because we need to know their allergies on the first aid, those kinds of things. But that's typically in a later stage. So we're really seeing that people are just starting with, let that one user run, give it a go. And from there, they figure, hey, if I'm moving more and more applications, can we use Login Enterprise to quickly scan all of my applications? Because the most boring thing in your image, and our typical customer has somewhere between 100 and 2,000 applications. The most boring thing is starting all those applications every time you make a change, right? But it's really important, because just the other day, I had a customer where some of their applications didn't work because they had the wrong version of Java. I think this is a very common problem. They fixed that, but they broke a bunch of other applications, right? So do you want to be that guy on a Sunday afternoon in the maintenance window opening 500 applications to see if they all work? Nobody's doing that, right? Nah, we'll just push it live. We'll hear tomorrow what happens. So that's one of those things. You push your applications live. The software blows through it. You get a report within a couple of minutes, like, hey, all of your applications work, or these don't work. There's a screenshot with it. You can see, oh, I'm missing a dependency, or the wrong version of Java. Sometimes, the most common thing we see is the pop-up where it says, hey, I'm not your default application for, I don't know, watching PDF files or whatever. So as an administrator, you can then choose, I'm just going to ignore that one for now. That's not something to fix on a Saturday night or in a maintenance window. But it is something to look into later, right? Just to make the experience better. And only then, when all of that is in place, we now see that people are really investing in load testing. That's where you start to look at, hey, we're maybe at a D4S now. What if I go to a D8 or a D16? How much more usage can I fit on there while also spending more, right? Where does that curve kick in for me? What's the optimal thing to do? And then from there on also, the ideal picture for us is really that you automate all of this, right? So you have a change. Let's say we want to update, I don't know, SAP to a new version. This change gets executed to a test image. We check if all of your other applications still work. Then we shoot a load test at it, right? We see if there's no impact at performance. And all of these steps run automated, right? And then only when all lights are green, it gets pushed to production. This could be fully automated. We also have some customers where they have a human in between that gets a report and then clicks, yep, So it's very important here to say that LoginVSI is not the orchestrator, but we fit very nice into orchestration, right? So if you have ServiceNow or things like that to manage the whole workflow, we'll be very happy to sit in there.
That is very, very cool. I'm going to be guilty of something, which a lot of customers probably are as well. I've always seen LoginVSI as a load testing tool. So predominantly, that's how I've used LoginVSI in custom environments. A customer builds an environment to say, I've got this, I now need to make sure it delivers as you said it would. So then we bring in LoginVSI, run it, there you go, there's your LoginVSI Max, etc., blah, 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 blah. System's ready to go. But essentially what we're saying now is LoginVSI can also be part of your day-to-day application testing or your monthly release cycle, or if you're going from Windows 1909 to 2004 and you want to make sure everything's working okay, you can use LoginVSI to automatically test all your application compatibility and everything's working as well, right?
Yep. And don't get me wrong, I mean, the load testing is still the most fun, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, our day job also involves, reporting on service level agreements and comparing platforms to each other and those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. I honestly didn't know. I did not know you could do all that stuff with LoginVSI. So,
and it's all in the same box while we're advertising, right? So it's just one product you you install. All the features are in there. So.
Good.
Mostly what you will see because of this one, we in the last few episodes of the podcast, we already talked about like image management and changing your golden image, treat your image like a lady, so rebuild your whole image. And mostly what you will see at customers is, well, they get an assignment to install a new application, and they install that new application and test only that new application. And sometimes it's integrated with Office and things, so they are testing the Office add-ins, but then it's all done. They think, okay, the application is working, we can go to test, we can go to production. And with this system, especially with the continuous integration and the compatibility testing, you can test literally all the applications.
I think you're right. I mean, the image should be rebuilt every time. What we also see is that there's a stop in between for a lot of companies. For example, in healthcare, what we see a lot is that they have a role there called application owner. It's typically not an IT person, but it's a business person that gets the updates a little bit in advance. But you also want to keep those guys happy, right? If you send them updates time and time again where the application doesn't even start, they're not going to be so willing to help you anymore. So in a lot of organizations, we see that we also automate their most basic tasks, like, hey, does the application start? Can I log on? Can I pull my basic report? So they have more time to spend on, helping other users in the organization instead of checking the basics. The whole idea actually to build this came from a large parcel organization and a large car manufacturer from Germany. That they have dedicated teams just starting and stopping these applications, all of them, within their environment. Just they literally had a folder in front of them, like, okay, start Word, check, works. Next, start Excel. And then 500 or 5,000 applications in there. And when they were finished, they would just turn it around and go back to the beginning, right?
Start again, yeah.
Their problem was not so much that system didn't work. It worked, and they didn't mind. They had 6 people working on that. But the problem was that Microsoft was releasing too many updates. So they couldn't keep up, right? It didn't scale anymore. And then we're not just talking about the half-year update cycle, which is already difficult enough, but the monthly patch cycles, the updates to Office, the updates that if you're automating your image management, you're probably, if you're a big enterprise, looking into SCCM, at least on-prem, right? So you're doing updates there. So it's just, throw the brochure out of the window and start automating your stuff, and make your life better.
Does anyone remember Load Runner?
Never heard of that.
So Load Runner I used to work for years ago for the Department of Work and Pensions. It's one of the UK's government departments. Got like 220,000 employees. And what you just said reminded me of what they used to do, because they basically had a whole building full of testers. And it was literally all these testers going in and doing what you just said, like ticking out, tick, 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 ticking boxes. Click next. Does it do this? Yes, no. Does it do this? Yes, no. But then they automated everything, and they had an application called Load Runner, I think it was from memory, and that basically just automated that whole process. That you can just, I think it's probably very similar to what LoginVSI does, but in a physical environment, where you just did your test, input it in the system, off it went on. But this was on like on physical workstations and stuff like that. So
yep. Yeah, so we've really had a start in the virtual world. Just XenApp was really our entry point into the market in 2008. Since then, I mean, we do a lot of physical environments as well. But like you said, most people know us for load testing. There's no real point of testing how many users you can fit on a physical machine. The screen and the keyboard typically limited to one anyway. But we also see that, funny enough, the suppliers of endpoints are talking to us now more and more. So every Agile device, if you have those thin clients, or Eagle for Patrick, right? If you have one of those on your desk, our software is already installed on it. It can act as an endpoint, so you can just enable it, and it will start to simulate user activity if you just start to desire so. So there's this whole ecosystem evolving around our products, where people see that testing from remote sites becomes very important to look at performance from the user perspective.
So the launcher has already been pre-installed on the Agile OS.
Correct.
Cool. Didn't know that.
Yep.
And
so
I think
everyone,
there are a lot of fans in this episode of Agile. So
great. No, it's in there. I think since half a year, something like that. So we're really happy with that. They're nice devices. We're also talking to other thin client vendors, of course. You know, once one has it, the other one start talking to you like, hey, we kind of also want to have it. But it's a nice use case because all of these devices are already in your organization, but also then you're testing from the platform where the real users are also coming from. So we were talking to an IT department recently where the IT admins were working on Windows devices themselves, but the users were on Linux-based thin clients. And they messed something up with the certificates, but the IT admins didn't know because their Windows boxes would accept them, while the Linux boxes wouldn't. So it's always, whether you're testing with our software or not, it's always important to also test on the same device that your user is on, right? To get the clearest picture.
yeah, and from the same location. So
Yep.
do your testing like in your data center, but also on your branch offices.
Absolutely, and that's more where we're looking at a continuous test. So for application compatibility and for load testing, we're really seeing that it doesn't matter. I mean, this is about WVD. So if we look at the WVD gateway and the broker and those kinds of things, there's really no point to do a load test through all of those components. We've also confirmed this with Microsoft, with the product team, and with internal IT, who are also rolling out their WVD environment with our products. Load testing, just keep it nice in Azure. Make sure you turn off all of your machines. I might be guilty of forgetting that sometimes, which turns out if you shut down a machine from inside of the VM, it's actually not turned off. So, you know,
You have to deallocate it.
Yeah, I've learned a hefty lesson there, but you know, it's things like that, and load testing goes perfectly well in Azure or any platform for that matter. And it's nice to see how different images react there. And what's also very important, which is a cheap thing you can do if you are currently running WVD and you want to improve the performance, is to run the free optimizers that are available. So you can either pick the Citrix optimizer, you can pick the VMware optimizer, or the optimizer from the VDI guys, which is actually a bunch of Microsoft employees, which greatly reduces the amount of stuff that you don't really need in Windows 10. Because Windows 10 is not really suitable for VDI out of the box. And when I say not really, I mean really not. You really need to do a few things to it to make it work. And if you do that, it works perfectly. So just to give you some insights, if I run a non-tuned environment, I can get 150 users on it. For the same price, if I have done optimizations, I can get 250 users on the same environment, right? Just by running a few small applications. Now, all of these three optimizers, they all work on each platform. So they are called the Citrix optimizer or the VMware optimizer. That's just because they make it, but it works crisscross. You don't have to tie it to any specific environment. You can choose your favorite.
Okay, Stefan, you did a survey on Twitter, didn't you, about that?
Sorry?
You did that survey on Twitter about Citrix, about the optimization tools?
I was just thinking about it, but first I wanted to ask you what you guys are using. So are you using the Citrix optimizer currently, Neil, or?
Yep, Citrix.
Yeah. And you, Patrick?
Actually, I used the ones from the VDI guys before, or the VMware also too.
Yeah. Yeah, so at the moment I'm using the Citrix optimizer. And since a few weeks I knew from Mark the VDI guys optimizer. So I've been testing and using that one now. And I think the poll on Twitter, it was the results were the Citrix optimizer mostly used, sometimes in combination with VMware OSOT, and in combination with the BizF framework.
That was like 67% used the Citrix optimizer, I was quite surprised at that. That's quite high.
So what we see, I mean, we run the VDI like a pro survey. That's Christian Brinkhoff, Ruben Spruit, and myself. And we do see in there that the Citrix community also responds more to these things. The way we know this is that, by number of votes, VMworld and Synergy should be an equally big event, which we know in practice is not true. So there is definitely on the internet, when it comes to community, there is a bias towards Citrix. But still, it's a nice, especially if you start maybe repeating that survey every now and then, Stefan, you can see the trends, right? It's not about the exact percentage, like they're on 67, but where are they trending in half a year? Are they going up? Are they going down? How's the market moving? That's what I always try to get from those things.
Good. So you do quite a lot of stuff with the community, right?
I try not to. No. Yeah. So it's. It's something that grew naturally when I started in 2008. I worked with Jeroen van de Kamp, who people in the community might remember. He's not doing anything too related to our industry anymore currently, but for him, community was a big thing. He was a Citrix CTP, I believe, at that time. We worked together a lot with Ruben Spruit. I think everybody probably knows him. He's very popular on the interwebs. But we also had Brian Madden visiting regularly in our office because he was good friends with Jeroen. So I was kind of spoiled growing up in that community, which really made me feel like I didn't know jack shit. Because these guys, I just came fresh from school. These guys were flying the world, doing talks everywhere, and those kinds of things. And I never really had the ambition to do all of that, but I just learned so much from them that telling other people, working with other people on how they're doing things and just discussing that and drinking loads of beer around the world, that seemed like a good idea. So I guess it all kind of came from that, like just having fun, drinking beers here and there, and things happen naturally. Yeah.
Who doesn't like getting together, chatting about technology, drinking beer and eating steaks, right?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit more complicated now. So for this year, I've been January. I was lucky enough to be in Munich still before everything shut down. I was at the IJUL event. That's the last thing I visited in person. So yeah, I'm ready to go, but I don't think we should do that anytime soon.
So have you seen from, obviously you get calls from customers. Now I'm going to guess here, but I'm guessing you've had quite a few calls from customers saying, COVID-19, we've put all these users on the system, we're getting performance issues, please come help.
Yeah, no, we've actually, we've sold some of our biggest and fastest deals due to this pandemic, which was not a goal, of course, for us. But yeah, doing very large deals in a matter of 3 weeks is unheard of. The amount of red tape that you normally have to go through. And obviously, we've tried to be very helpful, getting our resources ready to help people where we can. But we've also noticed that people just had to go, right? So there was no time to test, just go live. And we're actually seeing now that more and more people are coming back like, hey, we have this VDI environment, typically on-prem. It's running at 120%, right? Because everybody's working at home, we're doing Teams, we're doing, so we do not want to touch it anymore. We do not dare to do a change, right? Normally, if their VDI environment would go down, maybe 20 people couldn't do their job anymore. And a few of those were probably senior management that were working from home. So still, they kind of like to keep it live. Now it's, 200 or 2,000 people working remotely that they need to keep happy. So that's the biggest issue I see now. Like, we have this environment, it runs, we quickly got all the hardware where we could, or we got it from the cloud, whatever. But now we can't touch it anymore. So that's why we try to help, like, hey, if you change this, let's simulate what's going to happen. Is it going to hold, or is it going to be better? And luckily enough, there's typically a few small things that can, get you back on track towards being able to make changes again. Because Microsoft is just going to release that new version of Windows 10. They're not going to wait, and they shouldn't, right? Just last week, Citrix had an issue with their NetScaler, where I believe they had 11 leaks confirmed. You are going to have to patch, right? There is no choice. So how are you going to make sure that you are still live after that? And for a large part, that's of course having a disaster recovery strategy. For a large part, that's testing. For a large part, that's automation, right? If you invest in automation, maybe it isn't that hard to spin up an environment somewhere else. Just saying. But yeah, you're with what you have right now, probably. So it's.
Yeah. I expect
it's
over
really,
the next.
Go ahead.
Expect over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, there's going to be a lot of revisiting stuff that's been done. Because I think there's that phrase going around. Companies have done like 3 years worth of development in the space of 3 weeks.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of shadow IT in place currently, right? So if I look at healthcare, for example, a lot of healthcare people who are not, next to the beds are working from home, right? Because they rather don't want them in the offices right now. So they have paper at home with patient names on there. They're maybe using sometimes a Dropbox or a WeTransfer, or so I think there's also a lot of shadow IT to catch up with again. That we are currently totally unaware of. Like, yeah, it's not the biggest problem now. We're not going to get a fine. Just make sure you do your job, and we'll sort it out later. So I think we will see a influx in VDI usage over the upcoming time, and this is also things we see, where companies are reporting that their EUC branches are getting bigger, right? I saw reports from VMware there. I saw reports from Nutanix. Just look at how much more Azure is being used, or how much more Teams is being used. And for me, I don't see a reason why this will get lower anytime soon.
I think there's a lot of companies who are, well, I saw some stats, I don't know how accurate they are, but I think some stats are seeing something like 85% of companies are going to have sort of home working as a standard now. And a lot of companies are sort of seriously considering closing down offices and stuff like that, because they've seen and realised that actually we can, with the technology that we have right now, we can do it.
Yep. Yeah, we were forced to work from home, but now companies will see and notice. Yeah. Well, you can work from home. Your people can work from home and still be as productive as on premise with in the home office and all the things around it. So yeah.
But it also means that you need to invest in the home offices, right? So this is the next step there. Where I don't know for you guys, but I was fortunate enough to, I already have a PC here and a multi-monitor setup, and I have a nice office because I lived so far from our actual office. But there's a lot of people that don't have this luxury, right? So this is also something to think about. Like, hey, maybe those idle thumb drives, right, for people to push in their own PCs, or should we actually ship them, a full kit with a nice desk and a chair? And I even saw an advertisement for garden offices, right? Like a sea container, but then looking nice. So instead of a company car, they just drop one of those things in your garden, and you're set up.
And you got your home office.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean,
all those too.
why not?
Yeah, I think if this had happened like 5 years ago, it would have been a different story, right? Because if you look at where we were 5 years ago and where we are now, from a technology point of view, it's just mind blowing, right?
Yeah, it's cheap for the masses, right? Everybody can do a Zoom meeting on their phone if need be, or a Teams or whatever you prefer. I think that would have been a bit more difficult.
Yeah, and not only that, because like 5 years ago, so when Corona happened, they all needed to expand their VDI environment. Like 5 years ago, I think most of those will be on-prem. So they need to order hardware. They need to buy hardware. They don't know for how long. Maybe it's just 2 months or 3 months. And now you can just spin up, because it's about WVD, you just spin up and extend your host pool with like 20, 50 or 100 hosts. And you can easily fit those users on it. And when there's a shift from more at the office or other things, you can just scale it down and you don't have to pay anything for it. So 5 years ago, that would be totally different, I think.
Yeah, and the role of the office changes also, right? So I was just texting this morning with a few colleagues like, hey, which day are we going to the office this week? Just, more as a social gathering, right?
Yep.
So let's grab a coffee together. And it's stupid, right? Because for me, a drive to Amsterdam is 1.5 hours. So I drive to Amsterdam, have a coffee with a bunch of guys, do some work, drive back. So it's stupid, right? But still, just being at home all day, every day, also doesn't cut it. So for me, 1 day a week is a great solution. I don't know how that works for you guys.
Yeah, we are doing kind of the same. It's the same for me, because when I need to see my colleagues, it's easier to communicate, actually. And I think I would totally agree with you. It sounds stupid to drive only to grabbing a coffee, but it helps you in your teamwork, in your global communication and collaboration, to see each other, especially when you have new colleagues. Because due to Corona, I don't know how it is for you guys, but at least we employed a lot of new colleagues, and to see each other, to help them getting started with the business workflows, etc., stuff like this. I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, the company I work for, they are 100% remote, so we only go on customer sites when we have to. So that's a bit weird, but they did that even before COVID-19. They are all remote employees. So
yeah, we had our customers mostly remote, but most of the guys were in the office actually. But it's also, until now, I believe we had one customer that was really saying, no, we're not going to do it remote. We want you on site, which was, strangely enough, a hospital. So you'd figure that they'd be the first to say, nah, we can do it remote, man. We don't want you here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I understand on the 16th, there's a very special event happening with yourself and Stefan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Stefan is going to do his first webinar, right?
Yep. My very first one.
And it's going to be a popular one right away. I think we're seeing a lot of people. I haven't checked the statistics recently, but I think we were way over 200 somewhere. So and that'll obviously typically it goes up last minute even more. So
yeah,
it's it's a good first webinar.
Yep, and I know Neil and Patrick already signed in, so
yeah, I'm registered. Looking forward to it.
For sure. We're supporting you.
already got two.
Go, Stefan.
Yeah, but it will be a very interesting webinar, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So because Mark will also share all those nice presentations about the performance stats in relationship between the different versions of Windows 10, the performance charge. We're going to talk about WVD, the new WVD connector for Login Enterprise. So yeah.
It's going to be fun. I mean, we've been working on this before we actually knew that it was going to be WVD, which was, I believe, my first tests with Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. It had a different name back then, but we're in September 2018, where we got the ISO file and we got it running on premises, and we just figured, let's see how many users we can throw at it. And it contained a bunch of debug stuff still, and so it didn't really perform, but we easily shot above a few hundred, which was funny because then on the internet we were still seeing all the discussions, like there was something people were catching on to, like, hey, is Server 2019 not going to be supported anymore for multiple users? What are they going to do with Windows 10? So we were already testing this, which was a lot of fun. But little did we know that they were going to resurrect Azure remote apps in a completely new version, which was interesting. And until, I mean, right now we're working with the product teams at Microsoft daily to get this done, because there is just a lot of uncertainty, right? With server-based computing, by now we have our rules of thumb, right? With VDI the same. Nick from Citrix, Nick, I always get his last name wrong, Rintalan. He came up with the rule of 5 and 10. So do you guys know that rule?
Yep.
I don't know it. Maybe you can explain.
Oh,
Yeah. So what he says is basically for VDI, you can get 5 users per CPU core. For server-based computing, you can get 10 users per CPU core. Now, while there are many reasons why this is sometimes true and sometimes it isn't true, it is something to start with, right? It is a rule of thumb. So if my customers call me like, hey, what do you think we should do as initial scaling? I tell them, hey, here's the rule of 5 and 10. It's made up by Citrix. Also works for VMware. Go ahead and start your test with that. For Windows Virtual Desktop or any, Citrix Managed Desktop or VMware Horizon Cloud on Azure for WVD, whatever short name that they're calling it, is this gut feeling, this, the bunch of engineers that know what they're doing. It's not there. Everybody is winging it. It's the first time. There's no, people coming from an engineering class. They're like, hey, I'm fully certified on this. I've built 10 of them. I know exactly what the caveats are going to be. It's all new. And this is a challenge. If you're like a big company moving over there today, you kind of want everything to be stable. I've got this book here. It's called Crossing the Chasm. It's actually a marketing book, but it's all about different types of buyers. So it all starts with the innovators, and let's assume we are the innovators, right? We see a new button in Azure, we click it, even if it says don't click me, right? We're going to click it. On the other end of the chasm, you have the people that are still using the phones where you have to dial, right, with the circles. That's my dad. He's probably not going to try anything new, right? So how do you sell into different markets? So normally we would still be at the innovator space, and that's the first 16% of the market. And then there you get at a threshold where it's really hard to jump to get the rest of the market, because you start to do reference selling, where they say, hey, can you name 10 other hospitals that are successful with this? Or can you name 10 other banks? Do you have documentation? Do you have your code in a vault somewhere so that we know that for the next 10 years we can access it? All sorts of due diligence and paperwork. And it's, Corona just blew right through the chasm, where people who are normally the laggards are now saying, hey, we want to go to the cloud. And so there's not really great documentation on it yet, and the platform is not very mature. It doesn't matter, we're going. And that's really a shift in the market, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, it's also, I think, part of the problem is, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. A lot of it is now this stuff's so easy to deploy, right? So I can go out and a few click of a buttons, I can deploy 2,000 desktops to all my users. Just 5 clicks, I'm done.
Yeah, 30 minutes later, you got your desktops.
Yeah, but you've got no kind of optimizations in there or anything. You may have admins doing that who have actually zero experience of what we know as server-based computing, and GPU optimizations and application optimization, stuff like that. But because it's so easy, they can do it. And you probably can get a lot of instances of that happening. So I think in that scenario, your software becomes even more important, because if I've deployed 2,000 VMs and I've put 2,000 users on it and they're all struggling performance, it's putting a bad name on the stuff that you deployed. And it's also costing the company a hell of a lot of money. Whereas some employees might just turn around and says, oh, I need more desktops, therefore I'm going to go and create 5,000 desktops. And before you know it, the company's got a bill for like £100,000.
Yeah, we're just going to increase the instance size.
Yeah.
That'll solve all of our issues.
Yeah.
And
bigger is better.
yeah, well, that sometimes helps. Typically, you know, it really doesn't. We always talk about the concepts of maxing out a machine, so where it's full, versus the baseline, which is the performance when there's only, let's say, one user active, right? Because you can do things to optimize both, but it's really important to start having a very well performing base, because things like the storage performance, antivirus performance, workspace managers, those kinds of things, they matter for all users, right? Even when you're only 1 or 2 users on a machine, it matters how long an application start takes or how long the logon takes. So I you know, people always still think load testing is our thing and we only optimize that number like scalability. But for me, it's already like, hey, how can I make it better for user 1 that logs on? And performance is just one aspect of it. I mean, you guys were talking about also updates and maintenance. How are you going to do that? Rebuild your image every time. I think as a market, we have to mature a lot. I find it kind of interesting to be in the software industry, right? I mean, LoginVSI is a software company. And I'm a VDI guy in a software company. There's a lot that we can actually steal from software development and apply to VDI, right? DevOps and change management is one of those things. Websites like Facebook, they're never down for maintenance. Why does a VDI environment have a maintenance window, right? Well, I mean, honestly, there are technical solutions to work around that. If it's easier not to do it, but we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back too much as IT admins, just saying, it will be fine. And people are used to a slow logon, it's fine. One of the other questions in the VDI Like Approach survey that we do yearly is, you know, how happy are you actually with your VDI environment, both as a user and IT admin? And I can actually pull up the results because I kind of forgot what the results were for this year, actually. Let's not do that survey every week. Yearly is plenty of work.
So how many people did fill in that survey, Mark?
600-ish globally. So yeah, that's nice. And we're
And
really happy with
all end users, administrators.
Yeah, mostly technical folks, but even a few end users. And there was one guy that just went through all of the questions and ticked other, and then entered, I'm retired, I'm just interested in the next question. So it's really all over. We even had Elvis Presley filling the survey. Wow, so the survey is anonymous, but you can enter an email address, because we send out a few gift baskets to people who attend, because it's 60 questions, so it's pretty lengthy. So we try to be nice to some people. So if you enter your email, you can win, because obviously how else are we going to find out who filled the survey? But funny enough, most people, if you offer them a bag of Dutch dropjes and stroopwafels, they leave their email address. I actually found the data in the meanwhile. So I'm seeing that more people are saying that their end users are happy, but it's also at the other side, there are more people that are saying it's actually not great. So both the extremes are moving apart, which is an interesting data point. And I think really as admins, we should do our best to make it better and not say, you know, it works, so it'll be fine, because that's the hang that I'm getting at a lot of companies. Like, yeah, it's good enough.
It's working. It's working. Yep. They can log in. They can work.
Or it's not my problem, right? It's the other guy. It's the storage guys, or it's the networking guys, or it's Citrix.
Yeah. Cool. So, Patrick.
Yes.
You got anything more to ask, Mark?
Oh, yes. Actually, I have one last question for you, Mark. Also a little bit introductory about the session you do with Stefan on the 16th. It's about the WVD Starter Kit of LoginVSI. Could you just give us a small introduction to that? What can the users expect from that starter kit?
So the starter kit is really us helping you to start testing the performance of WVD quickly. So it's nothing new. It's nothing that you couldn't get your hands on today, but we've bundled all of our experience together. So I have a bunch of colleagues in the US. I have a bunch of colleagues here in what we call the rest of the world region. And we've made an expertise group for WVD. So what happens if you request the WVD starter kit now, you will be assigned to that group of people who are all familiar with building out WVD host pools and environments, who have environment performance testing. We have a special update for you of our product that you still need to attach, because not everything that you need to test WVD is in the download of Login Enterprise by default. You need to get that from us. We're really nice. We're giving it to everybody. It's just not standard in the build, because we want to do a little bit of hand-holding and make sure you do it properly, but also that we get feedback, because it's new. It's not perfect, right? We can test a lot of things ourselves, and Stefan is also testing a lot of things, and he also has some feedback points that we need to work on. So we just want to make sure that that's all tied together. We put it in a nice box, put a ribbon around it, and if you request that, you will get a white glove treatment. But the product actually did most of the heavy lifting already. Like I said, we've been doing this since 2018 somewhere. And we just want to make sure that, and we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast, that you're able to start one of those continuous tests really quick. And from there, we'll see.
Great. And that's free, right? Free for a month? Is that what I read, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Wow.
I think it's a little bit shorter than that, but if you ask nicely, I'm sure we can work that out.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's limited to, like, I think 20 applications.
Yeah, but if realistically, I mean, if you're just starting with WVD, getting the insights there, 20 applications is more than enough. Yep. Like I said, most people start with the Office suite. You can add a bunch of your own applications, and typically, if we're talking about an average customer, that also happens later on, where we're not involved anymore as LoginVSI, but the company themselves, they start adding applications. They go deeper into the applications that they find important. And funny enough, if you look at big companies like, let's say, BMW or DHL, it's not the amount of applications, right? The first time you go into those organizations, you ask them, how many of your 5,000 applications are business critical? They say, well, maybe 200. And then you start talking more and more and more. Even at those big companies, typically it's only like 5 applications that are really, really important, that the business stops if they're not there, right? The rest, there's a second tier that's you kind of want to have going because a lot of people use them, but your business doesn't stop, doesn't depend on it. So, that's all covered in the starting kit, but it's really us letting people know, hey, there's more than load testing.
Yeah, it's really great. And the session you are doing, will it be available on demand as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we're always recording this. So the webinar will be live on Thursday 2 times. So the first time, I think we're not going to record because it's Stefan's first webinar ever. And the second time we'll hit record and we'll push it into the world. And I expect to have a lot of fun.
Yep.
Sounds really great. Then
if you're interested in WVD, in LoginVSI, Login Enterprise, you should definitely sign up for that webinar.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's probably front and center on our website, loginvsi.com, if you want to register.
Yeah, or I think our latest WVD newsletter from last week, I think.
Yeah, it's in there, and it'll be in this week's as well.
Well,
it's also what we can do, Stefan, and we haven't discussed this before, so I'm kind of putting you on the in front of the, how do you say that? On the block? No, I don't know. Using Dutch sayings in English, always a good idea. But maybe we can use the WVD community as a chat during the webinar as well. So if you have questions, then we'll make sure to hang out there. Because like you guys said, you're all going to be there. So let's have a bit of fun and make it interactive.
Cool.
Because we've got a Slack channel, so you could give people the Slack channel address and create a separate channel there for for that webinar, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll hang around there in the days leading up to it. So if you have specific questions that you'd like us to handle, just let us know.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Sounds great. And when the on-demand video will be available, we'll put it, of course, on our new events portal page, where people who actually are interested in WVD and the products around it can review and check out the videos on demand. So even if you have no time to attend to that event, to that great event, we're already looking forward to it, you can review it here. And an idea could be for those people who have questions that we summarize those questions and put it beneath the video, below the video.
Good idea.
Yep.
Okay, is there anything else you guys wanted to cover?
I think we discussed the most important thing. So
Yeah, we'll
Sure.
we'll let Mark get his Sunday back. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. I personally have learned a lot. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, it's been an eye-opener for me. And I can't wait for the webinar on Thursday, is it? Yep. Good.
guys, thanks you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Right,
Thanks for having
Mark.
me, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.